President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol discusses the North's ICBM launch with Chinese President Xi Jinping. President Moon stresses ironclad security and defense. North Korea confirms test firing its biggest yet ICBM. Seoul's military conducts a rare training exercise to display air power. U.S. President Joe Biden travels to Poland, which borders Ukraine to the west and has been sheltering refugees. This comes after wrapping up his 4-day trip to Europe. Hello, we're wrapping up the week well. I'm Daniel Che here to bring the latest. Let's begin with our top story. President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol held a phone with the Chinese President Xi Jinping. Among other things, they discussed North Korea's ICBM launch. The incoming South Korean leader called for joint efforts to denuclearize the peninsula. Lee Kyung-eun starts us off.
In his phone call with Chinese President Xi Jinping on Friday, South Korean President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol called for a close partnership between Seoul and Beijing to bring peace and denuclearization to the peninsula, addressing the latest ICBM test by North Korea. Also discussed during the 25-minute talks were bilateral ties, marking the 30th anniversary of the two countries' diplomatic relations. That was actually the initial purpose of the phone call, having been arranged before the North's missile test. For that, Yoon emphasized mutual respect, and President Xi stressed stability, saying that the countries are close neighbors that have no choice but to live in the same region, as he reportedly put it. They agreed to facilitate high-level talks and expand cooperation on a range of issues, including climate change, fine dust, and global supply chain. It cannot be confirmed which side requested the call first, but Yoon's spokesperson highlighted that it is an unprecedented move for Xi, as he had not made any phone calls with the leaders before they officially take office.
I would like to say it presumably reflects high anticipation that Beijing has for its future relationship with Seoul under the Yoon administration to come.
Earlier in the day, Yoon was briefed about the situation with North Korea by National Security Director Seo Hoon under direct order from President Moon Jae-in, who's trying to make sure national security is maintained during the transition period. Prior to the meeting, Yoon in a Facebook post has strongly warned North Korea over its latest ICBM test, saying the regime will gain nothing through such provocation. Lee Kyung-eun, Arirang News.
North Korea claims it successfully tested the Hwasong-17 on Thursday. However, Seoul isn't fully convinced, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff is conducting research with the U.S. for further clarification. Bae Eun-ji has the full story.
North Korea announced Thursday that what they had fired the day before was its Hwasong-17 ICBM. But the South Korean military is said to be leaving open the possibility that it was actually a different type of ICBM, possibly the Hwasong-15 that the North launched in 2017.
The South Korean and U.S. intelligence agencies are currently conducting detailed analysis with a variety of possibilities in mind.
North Korea's Hwasong-15 and Hwasong-17 are both ICBMs, but experts say the large size of the Hwasong-17 suggests that the North is aiming to tip it with multiple nuclear warheads. The Hwasong-15 is estimated to be around 21 meters in length and 2 meters in diameter. The Hwasong-17 is slightly longer at around 24 meters and 2.4 meters in diameter. Analysts say this makes Hwasong-17 the largest liquid-fueled ICBM in the world. One expert says even if it was the Hwasong-15, the North seems to have developed it into a much more advanced version.
Because the North failed in its launch on March 16th, it's logical to be suspicious about the regime suddenly recording a huge success just 8 days later. But looking at the range, altitude, and speed, even if it's a Hwasong-15, it's true that it's a much more developed version.
North Korea had last launched the Hwasong-15 in November 2017. It flew 950 kilometers at a maximum altitude of around 4,500 kilometers. The missile on Thursday flew more than 1,000 kilometers at an altitude of around 6,200 kilometers, much higher than 4 years ago. Another expert says there is no reason for the North to lie, because if it has the capability to launch a Hwasong-15 this far, it could have done so in 2017 as well.
I mean, they could think that it's possible for it to be the Hwasong-17 because the North failed to launch Hwasong-17. But I don't think there's any reason for North Korea to fabricate things.
배은지, Arirang News.
South Korea carried out a military exercise in response to Pyongyang's latest missile launch. Seoul's defense chief watched over the drills to inspect the country's readiness and capability. Yoon Suk-yeol tells us more.
South Korea staged a military exercise Friday afternoon in response to North Korea's latest provocation. The Defense Ministry said it carried out the Elephant Walk, an exercise that involves taxiing military aircrafts. But it did not disclose the location of the training site for security reasons. Reportedly, about 30 F-35A stealth fighter jets took part in Friday's training that was inspected by South Korea's Defense Minister, Seoul-Beijing. The minister said Pyongyang's latest test fire was a breach of the suspension of ICBM launches promised to the international community and a clear violation of a number of UN Security Council resolutions. He added that the act was a serious threat to the peace and stability on the Korean Peninsula as well as to the global community. Dr. Ko Myung-hyun from the Asan Institute for Policy Studies says Friday's military drill was to deter North Korea's provocations.
It demonstrates to the North Koreans the South Korean capability to attack North Korean missile sites without being detected by North Koreans. I think in that sense, it acts as a deterrence against the North Korean missile threats and makes them think twice before they carry out next round of provocations.
This comes after North Korea on Thursday fired an intercontinental ballistic missile toward the East Sea, the first full-range ICBM launch in more than 4 years. The missile fired at around 2:30 p.m. from the Sunan airfield in Pyongyang traveled around 1,080 kilometers at an altitude of 6,200 kilometers. Shortly after the North launched its missile, South Korea's military fired several missiles toward the East Sea from ground, sea, and air. Seoul's defense ministry plans to maintain a state of military readiness, keeping a close eye in case of additional provocations by the North. Min Suk-yeol, Arirang News.
U.S. President Joe Biden and other world leaders are condemning North Korea's latest ICBM launch. The UNSC is set to hold a meeting with Seoul joining in as an invitee. Yoon Jung-min provides a glimpse of what to expect.
U.S. President Joe Biden and Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida on Thursday agreed to hold the North accountable for its latest ICBM launch after speaking on the sidelines of the G7 summit meeting in Brussels. According to Reuters, the two also affirmed the need to resolve the escalating tensions on the Korean Peninsula through diplomacy. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres also voiced condemnation.
The Secretary-General urges the DPRK to desist from taking any further counterproductive actions. He reaffirms his commitment to working with all parties in seeking a peaceful diplomatic solution.
The UN Security Council is set to hold a public meeting on Friday New York time to discuss North Korea's first ICBM launch in around 4 years. 6 countries, including the U.S., have reportedly requested the meeting. South Korea is also set to take part in the meeting as an invitee without a vote. Seoul's Foreign Affairs Ministry says the country plans to join a separate presser if there is one, considering the gravity of the issue. It remains to be seen whether Russia and China will work together with the U.S. and the West amid geopolitical tensions, including Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Meanwhile, the U.S. State Department on Thursday unveiled new sanctions on entities and individuals in North Korea, Russia, and China for violating a weapons non-proliferation regime. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
Turning to the latest in Ukraine, world leaders gathered in Brussels on Thursday for an emergency NATO summit to discuss Russia's ongoing attacks. Our Sung Eugene is standing by on the line with the latest. Eugene, what were some of the major announcements made?
Well, Daniel, following emergency talks between NATO, the G7, and the European Union, U.S. President Joe Biden and the President of the European Commission on Friday announced a joint task force to reduce Europe's dependence on Russian oil and gas. Chaired by representatives from the White House and the European Commission, the panel will work to find alternative supplies of liquefied natural gas and cut down overall demand.
So we want, as Europeans, to diversify away from Russia towards suppliers that we trust, that are friends, and that are reliable. And therefore, the US commitment to provide the European Union with additional at least 15 billion cubic meters of LNG this year is a big step in this direction, because this will replace the LNG supply we currently receive from Russia.
Meanwhile, President Biden is heading over to Poland on Friday, which borders Ukraine to the west and has been sheltering more than 2 million Ukrainian refugees. According to the White House, Biden will hold a bilateral meeting with Polish President Andrzej Duda on Saturday to discuss the U.S. and its allies' response to Ukraine's refugee crisis. Wrapping up his 4-day trip to Europe, Biden also hopes to meet Ukrainian refugees in Poland as well.
We have to talk about the humanitarian crisis in Ukraine. Any updates on the number of casualties and refugees?
Well, the latest data from the United Nations Refugee Agency show that more than 3.6 million people have now fled the battered country. The UN also reports as of Thursday that the civilian death toll has now topped 1,000, which includes at least 90 children. However, the actual figure is expected to be considerably higher, as officials from the besieged southern city of Mariupol said about 300 people died after Russia attacked a theater there last week.
And what's happening on the ground, Eugene? We previously heard Russian troops were stalled due to fierce resistance from Ukrainian forces.
Well, according to the UK Defense Ministry's latest intelligence update, Ukrainian forces have retaken towns and defensive positions up to 35 kilometers east of capital Kyiv. Also in the south, Russian forces are being stalled in advancing towards the Black Sea port city of Odessa due to logistics issues and Ukrainian resistance. However, civilians in the city of Mariupol, Kharkiv, and Izium are having to endure attacks.
And then, all of a sudden, the ceiling started to fall on me. I put some more clothes on after that. Then I came out here and everything was destroyed. There was a 2-story house over here. It's destroyed now.
That's all I have for now. Back to you, Daniel.
All right, Eugene, thank you for those updates. We appreciate it. The war in Ukraine is causing fuel prices to soar. To help people and businesses dealing with this energy inflation, the IEA approved a coordinated release of oil from the stockpiles of member states to help calm the market. Ji-young explains further.
As Russia's invasion of Ukraine sends shockwaves through the global energy market, leaders from around the world gather to discuss countermeasures. A 2-day meeting called by the International Energy Agency was held in Paris starting on Wednesday local time, bringing together officials from more than 40 governments and energy companies around the world. The IEA members officially approved the release of around 60 million barrels from their oil stocks, a move that was first announced earlier this month, soon after the war in Ukraine began.
Our release, 63 million barrels, was an initial release. Our member countries and the Secretariat are closely monitoring the markets. And in addition to this initial release, if our member countries decide so, we are immediately ready to act and release additional volumes to the markets. One shouldn't forget that 63 million barrels were only 4% of all the stocks we have.
He also said he'd consider these remarks by Russian President Vladimir Putin about only accepting rubles in exchange for gas as another Russian security threat.
I made a decision to take steps to switch payments for natural gas sold to so-called unfriendly countries into the Russian ruble in the shortest time possible.
The unfriendly countries he referred to are a list of states announced by the Russian government this month that it accuses of unfriendly actions. South Korea is on that list and, as part of the IEA measure, pledged to release 4.42 million barrels of oil from its reserves. Also, if needed, South Korea agreed to join in international efforts to secure supplies of petroleum and gas. Brazil and Canada said they'll increase oil production by 300,000 barrels per day by the end of this year. The U.S. Commerce Secretary who attended the IEA meeting said America and its allies are considering further coordinated releases and praised the initial action as a show of unity.
We all, I think almost everyone spoke in this last session, and everyone was united in condemning, obviously, Vladimir Putin's war, but also united in seeing how we can do what we can to both increase supply, adopt efficiency measures.
엄지영, Arirang News.
Gasoline and diesel prices spiked in South Korea, a visible consequence of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. This prompted some to drive less, while others are doing whatever they can to fill up for less. Choi Min-jung zooms in on this phenomenon.
Gasoline prices in South Korea have skyrocketed. According to Openet, a website run by the Korea National Oil Corporation, gasoline nationwide was selling on Friday at an average of 2,001 Korean won per liter, remaining above 2,000 a liter for more than 10 straight days. Prices for diesel are also skyrocketing, now also just shy of 2,001. Normally, gasoline costs about 201 more than diesel, but that gap has shrunk on average to just 82 won. At some gas stations in Seoul this week, diesel has cost even more than gasoline. That's partly because since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, diesel-intensive countries in Europe have been buying up supplies from elsewhere. Because prices are so high, people are looking for any way they can to save money, like using apps that show which gas stations are cheapest. Data from Openet show that the average number of people using its website each day to search for cheap gas has more than doubled this month compared to January. Others wait to fill up till they're outside the big city.
I try to visit places near Seoul, for instance, Gimpo, because the gas price there is much cheaper than in Seoul, and I really often visit there, visiting my friend there. So whenever I have a chance, like visiting my friend, then I tend to fill up my gas tank when I go there.
The price hike is also a huge burden for truck drivers who spend thousands of dollars on fuel a month. To ease the burden on consumers, the government earlier this month decided to extend the 20% fuel tax cut for another 3 months until the end of July. And depending on the price trend, authorities say there could be a further cut of up to 30%. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
Moving on to other stories now, Yoon Suk-yeol made a surprise visit to a briefing to the transition team by the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport. The president-elect vowed to cool down the housing market through deregulation. Kim Sung-min shares with us his remarks.
President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol on Friday reaffirmed his commitment to easing regulations on South Korea's overheated housing market. Unexpectedly joining his transition committee's briefing from the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport, Yoon hinted at a possible revision of the current regulations on the ownership of multiple homes. Currently, people who own 2 or more homes face taxes of up to 75% on the gain they realize when they sell a home. Property owners have been reluctant to sell, which has contributed to a lack of homes on the market. No details were mentioned on Friday, but Yoon has been pledging to pause the rule for 2 years, which could encourage homeowners to sell during that period. He also once again highlighted the importance of expanding the supply of homes, saying the regulations on redevelopment projects should be lifted to achieve that. His main pledge has been to expand housing supply by 2.5 million units during his term, mainly through the private sector. Kim Sung-min, Arirang News.
Seoul's prime minister says the country is likely over the peak of the Omicron wave. The government is focusing efforts on taking care of the critically ill and preventing deaths, as related figures have not been coming down. Shin Yeon brings the updates.
South Korea on Friday reported 339,514 new COVID-19 infections. This was down by roughly 56,000 from a day ago. To that, the prime minister said the country is seemingly past the worst.
Compared to last week, we're seeing 50,000 fewer infections each day on average. Though we still need to see whether this downward trend will continue, I think we can say that we're getting over the hardest part.
The Prime Minister cautioned, though, that more efforts are needed to reduce the number of deaths in severely ill patients because these figures usually lag 2 or 3 weeks behind infections. On Friday, 393 more people died, marking the third highest number of deaths since the pandemic. But authorities reiterated that South Korea's fatality rate of 0.13% is far lower than many other countries. New efforts in Korea's COVID-19 strategy include giving out more antiviral pills. Supplies of antiviral pills in the country are running low, as some 7,000 courses of Paxlovid are being given out per day. That's why authorities are trying to bring in a total of 460,000 courses of antiviral pills earlier than planned. They should all arrive by the end of April, with 100,000 courses of Lagevrio already here by this weekend. Lagevrio is the second oral COVID-19 medication to get the green light from the Ministry of Food and Drug Safety in Korea. They will be given to those at high risk who can't take Paxlovid due to it clashing with other medication. Another new measure authorities are considering is to stop giving out rapid antigen tests at all screening clinics. This means that only people at high risk will be tested by medical staff with a PCR test. Everybody else will have to use self-testing kits. And authorities are considering providing these kits at the screening clinics. So far, most districts have agreed to this decision in the hope that medical staff out at screening clinics can instead focus on treating patients. If discussions go as planned, this change could come in from April 4th. This is also when the next changes to the social distancing measures are expected. 신예은, Arirang News.
The European Medicines Agency advises member states to approve AstraZeneca's COVID-19 treatment. On Friday, the watchdog announced Evusheld is safe for use on adults and children over 12. The company had previously stated the drug reduces the risk of severe symptoms or death from the virus, both when taken preventively and within 3 days of developing symptoms. One study showed it could lower the risk of infection by 77%. However, doing additional studies when Omicron became the dominant strain, it was less effective compared to others. This is why AstraZeneca is considering adjustments to the guided dosage. Industrial robots, they help people get work done more effectively. These machines are thriving in South Korea. Jaein went out to find out what tasks they are mainly being developed for.
South Korea will be looking to the robotics industry as a key part of its transition to the digital era and the fourth industrial revolution. And in terms of industrial robots, the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy reported in 2020 that industrial robots account for more than 77% of the robotics market in South Korea. The Korea Institute of Robotics and Technology Convergence is developing various types of robots that could be used in a range of industrial fields. Celebrating its 10th anniversary this year, the institute is showcasing robots that are being developed to help industrial workers. Starting last year, water and wastewater pipeline must be cleaned regularly by law. So the Korea Institution of Robotics and Technology Convergence, Korea Water Resources Corporation, along with other companies, have worked together to develop this special robot to make the process much easier. And as you can see, it's very effective. The cord for this water pipe cleaning robot lets it move up to 250 meters from its base, blasting water at extremely high pressures. It has been tested in different types of pipeline, and now it's being readied for the market. And these huge pipes are used in semiconductor plants to extract hazardous gases during the production process. Because of its diameter, workers have to go up a ladder to weld 2 different pipes together, which could be dangerous.
This is the world's first robot that could help weld the inner parts of huge pipes. It rotates 3 times to thoroughly weld the parts that need to be connected. We expect worker safety to be guaranteed with the help of this robot.
There are also robots that could be helpful during the COVID-19 pandemic. The hybrid autonomous disinfection robot has 2 different methods to prevent viruses from spreading, using an ultraviolet disinfection system or by sanitizing objects itself directly.
I believe robots can help humans do certain jobs rather than replacing them. This robot could help workers in hospitals to sanitize beds and other objects more conveniently.
Both experts added, as robots are being used in tasks that are difficult for workers, cooperation between workers and robots is becoming more important. Lee Jaehyun, Arirang News.
Seoul announced a huge increase in support for people in their 20s and 30s who struggle to find jobs and housing. Explaining the plan on Wednesday, Mayor Oh Se-hoon said in the next several years, the city is going to invest 6.3 trillion won, or about $5.1 billion. That's almost 9 times bigger than the last budget announced in 2016. The money will be used to set up 10 city-run job training schools and connect young adults to over 20,000 jobs in the private sector, including the ICT industry. In terms of housing, Seoul will provide more than 55,000 subsidized units for those between ages 19 and 39. No further details yet, but the program will start next month and run until 2025.
Showers have begun for this evening, and rain will get heavier and more widespread overnight. These bands of rain are more clustered over southern regions, but enough of the rain will get pushed around towards the rest of the country. Therefore, an umbrella will be a must tomorrow wherever you are. The south coast and Jeju Island will see heavy downpours of 30 millimeters per hour. Typhoon-like winds are also in the forecast for these areas. This round of rain will continue into tomorrow morning. The Seoul metropolitan area, parts of Gyeongsang-bukdo and Jeollado provinces can expect 20 to 70 millimeters. Mountainous regions of Jeju Island will see up to 250 millimeters of rainfall. For inland regions, thunder and lightning will follow at times. Heavy rainfall coupled with gusty winds and thunder will increase a chance of landslides. Please be extra careful. Morning lows will be in double figures for most regions. Seoul will start off at 10 degrees Celsius. As for the daily high, Seoul will get up to 18 degrees, Gwangju 13, Daegu will reach 20 degrees. After the rain, conditions will get much breezier until the beginning of next week. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
That's all from us. Thank you for watching.